Good evening and welcome to the Greg Tompsett Sports Show. Tonight we are going to break down the trade deadline extravaganza to be able to talk about all the different positions the Buffalo Bills could be going after, different players they could be targeting, guys that I've spent some time researching, different areas that we need to look at and how they would fit and where those things want to go. So we'll go all over the place tonight, talk about how I choose what teams to look at as possible targets, why I list some players and not others. I'll talk about some of the big names that get thrown around. First, help me out. Give me a like here, press the button. Spent a lot of time in the Cover One Slack chat today, being able to kind of sanity check some of my list, getting some suggestions from some of the awesome informed fans that are in there. I actually got a couple that I thought were really nice suggestions that I didn't have on my original list. So some really good ideas floating around out there. Help me out. Press the like button when you get in here. Jump in, have some fun. Drop some suggestions in the chat as we go. I've got hold on, I'll tell you. I've got 28 names already on my list, but I know it's not exhaustive. I know there's some other areas and places that we can go, and I'll do some of that live on the show here tonight. So after I get through a couple different areas, I'm going to pause and kind of skim through the through the chat here and see if people threw out a name that I can research. I'll do some of it live just to show you how I go through the process to figure out if guys are able to be fit. And then we'll kind of see where it goes. Maybe we'll even add some more to the list as we go. Each position that I went through and researched, I have kind of some high-end wish list items, some bigger names, some familiar names that you guys will recognize from obviously previous seasons with the Buffalo Bills. And then each position, I kind of picked a Goldilocks, which is like this guy fits just right and meets a lot of the criteria. Those criteria are going to be obviously across a couple different things. One is price. Their cost, their contract, the ability to be able to fit them into our salary cap is a significant part of this deal. Everybody saw the report that we went through and restructured the base salary restructure for DeAndre Hopkins. That created $3.9 million. There are a couple other areas that the Bills can go in and play around with, but there's not a ton. Obviously it gets thrown around a lot. At Cover One, we all love Daquan Jones. That is a significant one that we could do. There's a couple other base salary restructures, but there's not a ton of other space. So a lot of this is if guys cost a lot of money. I still listed a few of them because there's some interesting names in there of guys that cost more money, but unless the other team is eating a huge amount of the salary or all of it, I just don't see it happening. So there are some examples of that. I know Denver ate every single penny of Randy Gregory's deal all the way down to the veteran minimum in order to get, I think it was like a 6th round pick in exchange for Randy Gregory in a 7th when he went out to San Francisco. So we'll see some of that kind of stuff here. It's not impossible for that to happen, but for the most part, unless the guy's contract is already in a incredibly cheap position, or the other team is going to be willing to eat all of the money virtually, it's just not realistic. I don't think there's spots where we're going to be able to kind of twist those things around and go through it. So that was a factor for me. Obviously, I don't think good teams are going to be trading players away. So I was pretty limited in the number of teams that I looked at to be able to add players from. I don't think everybody's selling. I don't think there's a ton of people out there looking to give away good players. And all of those teams, for the most part, I don't see them moving players that aren't either veterans or in a position where they don't have plans for them in the future. The struggling rebuilding teams don't trade young, talented, cheap players because they're still evaluating them, or they're trying to extend them, or trying to keep them and add them to what the potential rebuild is going to be. So, for the most part, these are veteran players, guys who would also step in and be a good addition to the team right off the bat. So Um, I focused on a couple different positions. I did do a little bit of work at running back just because some of the names get thrown around there. I will say here in the chat, I think that Dylan mentioned Deontay Foreman. I think Deontay Foreman is way more realistic than the other names that get thrown around. So I did look at Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry has like a $10.3 million salary, so we need to be able to make room for 5.72 million. Right now we don't even have that much cap space, so we'd either need Tennessee to eat money or for us to make additional cap space. I don't think they're doing that for a running back. I don't think Tennessee's going to eat money. I don't think they're going to trade Derrick Henry unless they get a pretty good return, because trading a franchise icon for a team that he's like their entire marketing plan is tough. Now, it may make sense on paper, but the owner has to sign off on a trade like that. So I'll believe it when I see it. It is possible. They've already traded away Kevin Byard, so it's certainly possible that they're going to move additional pieces. You'll see more Tennessee guys on my list here. I think there's a lot more realistic players outside Derrick Henry. Obviously, Saquon Barkley gets thrown around. Same exact deal, 5.99 million, unless the Giants are going to eat some of that money. I just don't see it as a feasible option, but I guess this is as good of an example as any. So let's go through and use Dylan's example. I'll show you guys how I do this. When I'm looking up a player and I want to check on the viability for their contract, I go here. You look at the base salary, which is 1.52 million. 1.52 million means that we have about 55% of the season left. So players are paid in 18 game checks throughout the year, the 17 game weeks and the bye week. They get one check, even if it's a bye week. They get 18 game checks during the season. So when you're looking at 1.52 million, and that's going to be with the remaining, 10 games out of 18, which is 55%, that's only 830,000. He doesn't have any per game roster bonuses. So Deontay Foreman would be really cheap. Money would not be a reason. He is the kind of possibility I could see if they wanted. I think I see a fair amount of, a fair amount of early younger Latavius Murray in Deontay Foreman. I don't think that's a big priority. I'm not super interested in trading for a running back, but Deontay Foreman to me makes a lot more sense than a Derrick Henry or a Saquon Barkley, because he's cheap. He wouldn't cost a lot for Chicago to send him to us, and he does fit some of the style of player that we've been going after. So that's just showing you my process as I go through and look at the contracts, how it fits, where those things go in. So shout out to the suggestion there from Dylan. That's the way that I go through and look at it. I think right now James Cook and Latavius Murray are a really good 1-2 combo. I'm fine with it. If we trade for Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry, I'll be excited just like anybody else, because that's really fun. Those are awesome names. But I don't expect that to happen. I'm going to go in reverse order. So the next position I looked at is wide receiver. Anybody who was super excited about the Bills going after a wide receiver, Thursday night, last night, didn't help, because it was Khalil Shakir's career best game, probably the best game this year from Gabe Davis, the best career game from Dalton Kincaid. It was a, very high performing game from a great deal of the rest of the roster. And we still got 9 catches from Stephon Diggs. All of those, led to a pretty solid offense. I went through and did some work. One of the guys in the Slack channel asked me to look at Rondale Moore. I thought that was interesting. Marquise Brown gets thrown around a lot. Marquise Brown has a $7.44 million number for the rest of this year. He still has, it's $13.4 million for his salary for this year. So you'd have to take on $7.5 million. That's just too much. Unless Arizona's eating that, I don't see a possibility of it. It is an expiring contract, so that one's a possibility. Marquise Brown is reasonably interesting. Let me see if I'll share this as I go position by position group, so you guys can see some of the names that I'm looking at. And some of the stuff that I've played around with. Let's see. How's this look? So as we go through, you guys can see some of the names that I'm looking at here. So Marquise Brown has gotten thrown around a lot. DJ Chark, I think, is an interesting one in Carolina. He's only got 1.08 million, a minimum salary. I think he's a bit of a field stretcher. I think you could get him for a pretty cheap deal. He also has void years on his contract, which means Carolina cannot get a comp pick for him next year. You'll see that as a repeat of many of the different things here. Jerry Jeudy is a name that gets thrown around a lot. He's 2.5 million, 2.6 million. And he's one where, I think that it sounds good, but he's also got his 5th-year option picked up next year, which is 12.9 million guaranteed. So you are not just signing up for Jerry Jeudy for the rest of this year, you're signing up for Jerry Jeudy cheap this year and $13 million fully guaranteed next year. That's a lot for me. So I think I'm out on Jerry Jeudy. Darius Slayton is a guy that I think gets a bum rap. I think he's got some juice left. He was a 4.39 40 guy. He still is only 26 years old, had a 40.5-inch vertical, is pretty elite athlete. I think that's a sneaky one for depth that you could get really cheap, and for virtually nothing. The couple names that stood out to me, Rondale Moore was a suggestion in the Cover One Slack channel. I joked and put him as Thick McKenzie. He's 23. He's super cheap. He's kind of a gadgety guy. He's a mix between kind of a bigger Deontay Hardy, a bigger Isaiah McKenzie, but is an interesting player, and he's cheap next year at 1.6 million. Also, I have no idea why Arizona would want to trade him because he's cheap for them too. And Kyler Murray's coming back. They have him cheap next year. So I don't expect them to move him, but if they were interested in it, I'd be open to it. Obviously, the name that goes out there all the time is DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins checks all the boxes. He's probably the only actually available receiver who would come in and start. He obviously is right now in 2023. He is an upgrade over Gabe Davis. He's owed $12 million this year, but the Titans have already paid him $10.75 million of that $12 million. He's only owed $1.25 million more the rest of this year. He does have a $13 million contract next year, and none of it's guaranteed. So he has a roster bonus due right on like the first day of the new league year, and you decide right off the bat. But if they want to walk away for no money, they could walk away immediately and just say, nope, I'm out. So I think DeAndre Hopkins is probably the biggest name out on the trade market that I do think is 50-50 or greater to get moved. Most guys aren't going to get traded. The NFL trade deadline usually isn't crazy. I don't think a ton of big flashy names are going to go, but as Mass said it here, Hopkins for a rental is pretty simple. I think I saw a couple other folks talking about it up here. He does make a fair amount of sense as someone who actually does move the needle and is cheap. I know a couple people asked about Hunter Renfrow. I've talked about him before. I actually didn't even include him here because, as Ron mentions here, he's out of our price range and plays for a team with a historically cheap owner. So I will believe that Mark Davis is going to eat money in order to facilitate a trade when I see it, because he's literally never done it. He's never eaten money to facilitate a trade. I don't expect that to all of a sudden happen now. I like Hunter Renfrow as a player, and if Las Vegas wanted to eat the money to make him a minimum player, I would add him, but I don't have him on my list because I don't expect that to be an option. I do think Tennessee will be taking calls on DeAndre Hopkins. I do think it's 50-50 that he gets moved. So I am going to make DeAndre Hopkins my Goldilocks from a receiver group standpoint. I think Darius Slayton and DJ Chark probably make the most sense as far as a likelihood standpoint. You could get him really cheap. I think that's where that's going to go. Kaz, don't worry here. He's saying we need defense. All the rest of the positions I'm talking about are defense, and it's going in reverse order of likelihood. So I talked about running back and wide receiver here just because there's a lot of attention around it. I don't think that's going to happen at either of these positions. But we need defense, and that's where most of my work was done, was on the defensive side. Okay, so I'm gonna leave those there. My pick at wide receiver, if we do make a move, as crazy as it sounds, I kind of think is DeAndre Hopkins. So I'm gonna take a quick water break here, and then we'll get going again. It's nice when I have Aaron to fill time in between me talking about things. All right, so the next spot I'm gonna go to is linebacker. Linebacker was an interesting one because there's a lot of different options here that go in different directions. So at linebacker, um, I am interested in coverage, first, second, and third. Sorry, real quick here. That guy Levi asking a question about if we get Hopkins, um, would Diggs play the slot? If you get Hopkins, the two of them can both play the slot. And you would be able to move them around all the time where one of Diggs, Hopkins, or Kincaid would be in the slot probably 80% of the time. And it would be fantastic. And it would be very, very functional and productive. They would work really, really well. All three of them. But obviously, we know Kincaid plays well in the slot. He plays 50% of his snaps in the slot now. Diggs is great in the slot. Hopkins is also actually really good out of the slot. So that one would work fine. All right. Back to linebacker here. So again, I was focused on coverage, first, second, and third priority, because Terrell Dotson's actually pretty good against the run. I like now, don't get me wrong. Would I love a linebacker that can do everything? Of course, but I I'm more concerned about the coverage side of it and adding that skill set. You then add in that I'm not I'm not particularly shopping for a long-term fit at linebacker. Of course, I'll always take that, and there's a guy on here that I'll talk about that has that um, possibility and potential to it. But ultimately, I think Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard are going to be our starting linebackers here for a bit longer. Matt Milano's obviously not going to play forever, but he's not done. Like he might come back this season, and I expect him to play really well next year and for 2 or 3 more years. So I'm not looking for, and obviously we're excited about what we found in Terrell Bernard. So I'm going to start with our guy Uber Hansen. His number one favorite is Jack Sanborn. Jack Sanborn was a UDFA in Chicago last year, played for them, played really well, looked legitimately good. He's a good athlete. He's super cheap. You get him for like less than the minimum because he's a rookie contract. You get him cheap next year for 985,000, and he's a restricted free agent rights in 2025. So you get him cheap for like 3 years. I, it would be cool for this year, but Chicago's going to want to get compensation as though you're getting a like 3-year starter. They're not going to want to give him away. So I can't imagine that there's a price that we're going to want to pay and that Chicago is going to be willing to give him away for, because he's a nice asset for them as well. They don't need to give him up. They know he's good, and they have him cheap for 3 more years, for this year and 2 more years. I don't see why they'd want to give him up. So if we needed a longer term answer and Matt Milano had like a career threatening injury, I might be more interested in like, hey, maybe we should pay up a little bit more. So I like Jack Sanborn as an answer here. I don't see the fit from a um asset standpoint. So the other 6 names on the list here are all veterans, 26, 27, 28, and one that's a little bit older. Um, most of them have either an expiring contract. Josie Jewell, Aziz Al Shair, and Frankie Louvu all have expiring contracts, or the other three, Robert Spillane, Kyzir White, and Eric Kendricks, have no guaranteed money of any material amount next year. Kyzir White does have 1 million guaranteed next year. I'm not sure that's why they they would need that. RJ here saying, why did Chicago need all the linebackers again? Honestly, I have no idea why they signed both TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds to huge deals to put Jack Sanborn on the bench when he played really well. It was kind of weird. I don't really understand, but they did. They went and spent a ton of money on a position where they had a really cheap, good answer at home. It was a weird choice. So all of these guys, I didn't put anybody on here who wasn't pretty good in coverage and had some legit ability. Josie Jewell and Robert Spillane are having really good years this year. Historically, they've been okay. as coverage guys, so I'm not sure how sustainable that is or if those are just kind of fluky numbers for this year, but their coverage numbers this year are pretty good. Josie Jewell's a $4.5 million guy, so that dings him a little bit. We would probably need Denver to eat some money there in order to fit him. You then look at some of the other guys. Frankie Louvu is not the same as Jack Sanborn, but I do think Carolina likes him. I think there's a chance that they would want to extend him and aren't looking to trade him. And he's probably more versatile than the other guys. He's better against the run. He's a good blitzer, but he's probably not as good as in coverage as the other guys. So it really comes up. These three were my top choices. Azeez Al-Shaair in Tennessee, he's 26. They had him on a void, kind of like a $5 million deal. He was in San Francisco as a UDFA and was there for a while. I think that that's a situation where we're I think that there's more that he can do. But he signed there on a 1-year deal, and they did it with void years, so they can't get a comp pick back, which does help in that they're more interested in wanting to get something for him. Kyzir White, same thing. He has a little bit of money in 2024, not crazy amount, but that might ding him a tiny bit. And I think that there's some potential here. Adam asking about Deion Jones. Let me look at his real quick. I want to say there was something I didn't love about his contract. Let me see what comes up here as I look at his. So the reason, while I'm checking out Deion Jones' contract, the reason that I like Eric Kendricks is, one, the Chargers are a disaster. He is a excellent coverage guy. He's been one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL for a while. He's obviously, he's 31. He's not part of the long-term plans for the Chargers. He has tons of zone experience. He's a super knowledgeable vet about being able to go and kind of review and step into any defense quickly and to be able to kind of fit. And I can see that having a fair amount of value to a lot of teams. I know what it was, Adam, when I looked at Carolina. Deion Jones is also there. He's not playing super well this year, and I liked Frankie Louvu more, and I didn't put multiple from the same team, so I just picked Frankie Louvu over Deion Jones. I'd be fine if Deion Jones came in. We did some work on him this offseason. Eric looked at it. He's lost a pretty good step from where he was before. I loved him in Atlanta early on. He's lost a pretty healthy step since those days. So that's why I had Louvu on there instead of him. I just picked him over where Deion Jones was. So my Goldilocks pick at linebacker is Eric Kendricks. I would be really happy with any of these three, and honestly, I would do any of the 7 on the screen. I think any of these guys would make sense. Eric Kendricks, although 31, does not look like he's lost a step. He's still looking pretty good. Kyzir White and Azeez Al-Shaair are both athletic, good guys in coverage. I would like Frankie Louvu or Jack Sanborn. I don't think that I see those teams moving them. I don't think that they're going to, or not moving them for the price we're going to want to pay. I think we're going to want something on the cheap, 5th, 6th round pick, something like that. And Josie Jewell and Robert Spillane are fine. I'm a little skeptical that their coverage ability we've seen this year is sustainable and something we're going to see consistently going forward. Tim here talking about Christian Kirksey. I think that he just realized he didn't have it left and kind of stepped away rather than stepping on the field and making it blatantly obvious that he had lost that step. So I think if he was interested in coming back, he would have. So I'm going to trust it that he knows and that the team would have pushed harder if that was still something they needed. The next position, our friends at defensive tackle. So this one, I am going to be very hesitant on spending a lot because I'm going to trust our friend Kyle Trimble, who talked about the potential to come back and tweets directly from the man himself, which is Daquan Jones, and that I trust Daquan Jones is going to be back for the playoffs and is going to be here and ready to play. There are multiple examples of one tech big defensive tackles having these pec strains, being able to come back in the time frame to be there. I'm going to trust that that's the case. So I think we're going to get him back, but I think we need it during this stretch. As Ron talked here, I am kind of letting the cat out of the bag of what my choice is. You can see where my bold coloring is. But we'll talk through a couple of them. Shy Tuttle is in Carolina. He was really good in New Orleans. He hasn't looked quite as good in Carolina there, and he has a guaranteed chunk of money in 2024, so I'm not sure about that one. Harrison Phillips is okay. I think he's a nice player. We obviously love him as a human. He's an awesome person. He's a known quantity here. I wouldn't be shocked. He costs a little bit more. He's got a $4.5 million salary this year, so we'd owe him another $2.5 million. He's got $6.5 million on the books next year, which isn't the worst thing because we don't have a lot of defensive tackles under contract next year. But I don't know that he's really better than Tim Settle or Poona Ford, and he's certainly not Daquan Jones. A cheaper version of that is Mike Purcell in Denver. Just a good, solid veteran defensive tackle, can play one tech, really stout against the run, 6'3", 328, pretty cheap contract. It's like, $1.5 million. He's got some game check things that we can do. TN Bills fans here asking why not just try and get Sue. And Ndamukong Suh has come up a lot. I'm going to assume that if he wanted to play, he would have. He had signed in Philadelphia a little bit earlier than this point last year. I'm open to it. If he's got snaps left in him, he's, a dominant athlete. He obviously needs to play pretty limited amounts, but I'm going to trust that if he wanted that, he would have done that. And that I'm guessing that run in Philadelphia last year was probably it. I haven't heard it official that he's done and no longer playing, but I know I've heard other people speculate that. And I assume that if he was looking to play, that he would be out there and would be already in place with somebody if that's what he was looking for, including maybe going back to Philadelphia if he liked it there last year. But I would welcome him. I wouldn't be against it. I think you'd have to limit his snaps to like 15 to 20 a game, but I would take it if he was interested. Another one is TR Tart. He is in Tennessee. A little bit more money, 4.3 million. So we'd owe him another like almost 2.4 million the rest of the year. Another expiring deal, but a 6'2", 324-pound guy, plus run defender, pretty good history of it. I'm not sure if Tennessee's looking to bring him back next year, but mine is Andrew Billings. I wanted Andrew Billings this offseason. He was one of my major free agent targets. Him and Poona Ford were kind of my dream pair to be able to add. I really, really like him as a player. Had great seasons in Cincinnati. He's also really cheap, so we'd only owe him $1 million the rest of the year. He's on an expiring deal. He's only 28. He is a consistently stout run defender everywhere he goes. He would be a perfect addition. He would be an absolutely perfect addition. Cheap, checks all the boxes, consistently available, not a bad injury history. He checks all the boxes for me. Andrew Billings is my guy at that spot. So I'm going to hide some of these so I can kind of make a list as we go of my Goldilocks picks and show that at the end of where those go. And we'll get into the last position here, which is cornerback. So cornerback, obviously, this is in addition to the Patrick Surtain trade. So obviously, we're going to trade for Patrick Surtain, and then one of these guys in addition to that. I'm being sarcastic. People have heard me kind of rant about Patrick Surtain. He's awesome. He is amazing. I genuinely think he's the best cornerback in the NFL. I think he's better than Sauce Gardner because he can do all the things Sauce does, and he doesn't need to grab every other snap. I think he's absolutely awesome. I think he's the best young corner in the NFL. He's a 23-year-old all-pro with multiple years of rookie contract control left, plus the fifth-year option, and being able to then he's going to want like a $25 million a year extension. I trust Ben Albright. I don't care how many other of these fake rumor sites say that, they're taking phone calls on Patrick Surtain. They're not. They're not. He's not available. RJ saying here, if it's 2 firsts for Surtain, it may actually be worth it. If it's 2 firsts for Patrick Surtain, I would personally carry them by hand to Denver and give the 2 first-round picks by hand there, because it would be such a ridiculously good deal. They would look, say, "Oh, no, thank you," and then after they close the door, they would laugh. There's no possibility they're trading him for 2 of our first-round picks. Maybe for Chicago's 2 first-round picks, where they get Carolina and Chicago's in the second and the fourth overall picks. They're not doing it for ours. When Jalen Ramsey went from Jacksonville to the Rams, he was disgruntled trying to force his way out of town, and they still got 2 firsts and a fourth for a guy who is trying to force his way out of town. So at a minimum, I think they're getting that. He's a good player that isn't trying to force his way out of town and isn't trying to do those different pieces. I'm going to trust Ben Albright when Ben Albright says he is untouchable, that they're using him as bait to get other teams on the line for other players just because they want to be able to talk to them about trading other players. I'm going to trust that that's the case. So, rant over on our friend Patrick Surtain. Of course, I would give up. So if it was me, I would trade 2 firsts, a second, and Kyzir Elam for Patrick Surtain, and I would not think a second time. He's absolutely amazing. Of course, I would do that. I think Denver would turn that down. 2 firsts, a second, and Elam. I think Denver would turn that down. But I would be willing to do that. He's not getting traded. So, as we look at the rest of this list, there's a couple. I think I didn't even list Levi Wallace. I love Levi. I know our guy Aaron Quinn has brought him up. He's playing really, really bad for Pittsburgh right now, having a really bad season. On a handful of advanced metrics, he's having the worst season of any cornerback in the NFL. So I didn't even list him. But, Levi Wallace is a name that comes up fairly often. Antonio Hamilton is a guy that his name had come up. He's having a rough year in Arizona as well. I don't even think he wouldn't even play over Dane Jackson. He is Josh Norman. So we don't need Antonio Hamilton, but his name would come up. Adoree Jackson is a guy that had come up and had been, an available option for several targets as a free agent. Ultimately, his contract is really prohibitive. It's an $11 million salary, so the Giants would have to eat money. I don't think they need to move him that badly that they're going to eat money and trade him away. I wouldn't be mad if they did. He's okay, but I just don't see it. Next is 2 guys I had as top free agent targets this offseason, both Rasul Douglas and Dante Jackson. They're both 28. Rasul Douglas is pretty cheap with a $1.08 million salary plus a little bit of per game roster bonuses. He would cost $860,000. Dante Jackson has a similar salary, but a little bit more in per game roster bonuses, so $1.6 million. Both of them are doable. Neither of them have any guaranteed money next year. Both of them have pretty high salaries next year, so we'd have to see how they play. $10.4 million for Dante Jackson, $8.25 million for Rasul Douglas. Rasul Douglas, 6'2", 209, crazy long arms, tons of zone experience. Same reason I wanted him in free agency. I would want him now. I would give up something decent for Rasul Douglas. I think he makes a fair amount of sense. As Nick mentioned here, he has versatility to play in the slot and outside. So he's probably number 2 on my list here. I would really like Rasul Douglas. A lot of people have brought up Jaylon Johnson. I think he's a really good player. I think he would make sense. He was second rounder out of Utah. He had a good RAS score, 6 foot, 196. He's playing good football for Chicago. The only reason he might be available is he wants a bigger contract than what Chicago is willing to give him. I don't know that he would be expecting a deal upon trade, but the only reason I can think of is maybe Chicago is looking to spend money this offseason. They're not going to be in the comp pick game, so they want to get something for him. And if they know they're not going to sign him, they would want something. I think he would cost the most of any of these guys because he's young, good. He wants to get paid a lot of money. I like him. I would be willing to do it. I'm not sure I want to pay the full price that he's going to be asking for. But I'd be open to it of what's there. So we'll see where that one goes. And the reason that leaves Sean Murphy-Bunting as my Goldilocks pick here at cornerback is he checks every single box. He's still 26 and young, had several really good seasons in Tampa Bay, signed a 1-year deal in Tennessee. They use void years, so even if they want to do the comp pick thing, they can't because you don't get any comp picks for a guy whose contract voids. He's an elite athlete. He has a suit because they did the void years that spread out all his money, so he's a minimum contract. So we would only take on the rest of his $1.08 million minimum. We would owe him $600,000, and that's it. He has no contract next year, so he's incented to play his butt off and to be able to go get a new contract in the spring. He checks every single box for me. He all of his experiences in Todd Bowles' zone defense in Tampa Bay. He's an elite athlete. He checks every single box for me. Tennessee is already selling pieces off. They already sold off Kevin Byard. I would give up a 4th-round pick for Sean Murphy-Bunting. I think he makes a lot of sense to be able to go after and to be able to look at. So, although Jaylon Johnson would be awesome, I think he would cost more. I would do Rasul Douglas. He was a really close second. Rasul Douglas would probably be my other wish list guy. I might even leave a little bit of that open. I'll let me do the other like number 2 guy at each position here. So it would be Rasul Douglas, and there I think at defensive tackle for me would probably be Mike Purcell. I think he would be cheap and would be kind of easy to get and a nice plug in until we got Daquan Jones back. At linebacker, I think it would be Kyzir White, but I won't lie. Azeez Al-Shahir, that was a suggestion from Ron. I really like him. He would be a really close 3rd for me. I would love any of those 3, but I think it would be Kyzir White just by a hair over Al-Shahir. And then, obviously we mentioned DeAndre Hopkins and the, weird fit that he is at receiver and the way that they set that up. I would say my number 2 choice at receiver, I think, would be DJ Chark. I think that was a shout out to our guy Judge. Steve Mathis was pretty high on him and his field stretching ability. We're not trading for a running back. I talked about it just because lots of people were asking. We're not going to trade for a running back. So here's where the final list for me turns out. I know I saw a couple people in the chat asking about Jameson Williams out in Detroit and doing a swap of Kaiir Elam for Jameson Williams. I don't I guess it's possible. Sure, I would take it. I'd be really surprised if Detroit's ready to sell that fast on Jameson Williams. If they had a good grade, they do run a lot more man defense than we do. If they had a good grade on Elam and they want to give us Jameson Williams, absolutely. I live in between the two. I will drive to Detroit, pick up Jameson Williams, and drive him to Buffalo. If they want to do that, that would be great. I would be really surprised if Detroit wants to sell that early on a guy they picked top 12, and I think still see plenty, but he was hurt and then got suspended. I don't think they're out on him, but I'd be open to it. Sure, I would be willing to do that. I'm kind of scanning through the chat here just to look for some of the other suggestions here. Adam mentioned some guys I looked at: Kendall Fuller, Steven Nelson, Ben St. Juste. I don't think those are crazy. I like some of the corners I listed a bit better. I think that they're playing better and are a little bit there. I think Kendall Fuller is not crazy, but he's more of a nickel, not really an outside guy. St. Juste is mildly interesting, but I did play around with those guys, but they didn't make my list. Andy obviously liking the Sean Murphy-Bunting pick. He's obviously very smart. As we go through, let's see. All right. So last chance here. If you guys want to if you typed one up higher and I didn't see it, go ahead and send it to me again, and I'll do any last minute research. So I'll go through here. Bills are electric here. The only guys I looked at were one tech style defensive tackles. I didn't even really look at the other ones that were out there. I pretty much only looked at those kind of one tech stout run defender defensive tackles. Those are all of my guys that I listed there. So um right now, here's my list. The bold is my Goldilocks pick of who I think the best choice is, and then my number 2 would be here. Adam asking for about Tyler Boyd or T. Higgins. I just don't see. Honestly, I also took some realism into place of teams I don't think are going to trade with the Bills. There's some players on New England that I think are mildly interesting. I don't think they're going to trade with the Bills. I don't think there's any possibility Cincinnati is trading one of their receivers to the Bills to then face them potentially in the playoffs. It's not impossible. Maybe they would. I don't see that happening. So there was some stuff that I took into account of who I think would be willing to trade with us to do it. So there are plenty of other players that I like on other teams, but some teams that are kind of in the middle right now. I don't know how far Cleveland's going to go, but they're having a good season. I don't think they're going to sell off much of anything. I don't see them doing that. There are other teams that maybe should be looking to trade, but they're having a good year, and I don't know if they're gonna. So, or teams like I mentioned with um the Raiders, where they have a historically cheap owner, unless the contract for that player is already really cheap. I don't see Mark Davis eating anything. Adam, the one I did look through that. They don't have a lot of real good tradable contracts, but Eric Kendricks is from the Chargers. They're 2-4. They're looking pretty rough. Their season's not over, but I listed Eric Kendricks because I think they should be selling. I don't know if they think that. Oh, darn it. Here is a really good one. So Zachary Brooker, this is another one that shame on me. I should have added as part of this. So we'll do this one live. That's a really good suggestion. This is purely me as a brain fart. I like Darnell Mooney and listed him earlier, and I just forgot to list him as I was going through here. But let's share that, and I will show you guys how I go through and do that research on a player. So I'm going to go over here. This is when I looked up Deion Jones. I'm going to look up Darnell Mooney contract. Again, a lot. I like Spot Track a lot as well. I prefer Over the Cap. I think their contract works a little bit cleaner. He's in the final year of his rookie deal, so $2.99 million. I don't think he has any per game roster bonuses. He doesn't. So on the spreadsheet, I add that as let's see, he's 26. So I'm going to add that on there. And then he is 2.993 million times we have the remaining 10 games. So 2.993 times 0.555. Yes, I am that nerdy. So it's 1.66 million. It's an expiring deal. I don't know what Chicago would want, and it really kind of depends on what are their plans for him for next year. But that's a great call by Zachary because he is a player that I liked a lot and that I should have had there. And I actually would put him ahead of DJ Chark. And I think I might even give a fourth for him. I think Darnell Mooney is a super underrated player that I think he has a lot of advanced metrics that show he's better than the quarterback situation than what he's produced. So I think that there's a pretty good opportunity from that standpoint to be able to go through here. As Spin brought it up here, Chicago has a defensive tackle, linebacker, and quarterback. I would trade them a package of picks to send us Jaylon Johnson, Andrew Billings, and Darnell Mooney. If they want to send us all hell, Jack Sanborn, you could send us all four of those. Andrew Billings, Jaylon Johnson, Jack Sanborn, and Darnell Mooney, and we'll just send them like our 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks. We'll send them 4 picks. They send us those 4 players. Done deal. Everything's good to go. So we'll see where those things kind of fit out. But here's where my final list goes. That was a great addition and a shout out. Good call out there from Zach to remind me about Mooney. So here's the final list. My number 2 at cornerback would be Rasul Douglas, with my number 1 being Sean Murphy-Bunting. He's probably my number 1 overall player that I would want to go after. I think he would really make a material difference. Although I do expect Daquan Jones back for the playoffs, I think Andrew Billings would be a really nice addition, for the rest of this season, and is, again, very reasonable and cheap. At linebacker, I would like Kyzir White or Eric Kendricks, but I think Kendricks really has a possibility to step in and help. And at wide receiver, it would be awful fun if we traded for DeAndre Hopkins. And the fun part is, even if we did all 4 of those trades combined, it would only be $3.5 million and less than the Deion Dawkins base salary restructure. So we could fit all of these. Obviously, I don't expect Brandon Beane to make 4 trades. I'm not even sure if Brandon Beane is going to make a trade, but I certainly don't expect him to make 4 trades. He did make 2 last year. I expect them to be these kind of names. I don't think I don't, I would love DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not sure that'll be it. I think it's going to be the kind of, a lot of people don't know who Andrew Billings is. They won't be excited. They should be, but they won't be excited. A lot of people don't know who Sean Murphy-Bunting is. Those are going to be similar to the Nyheim Hines and Dean Marlowe type trades we made last year. I think these guys are both a step above where those 2 were, but these are not names that a ton of fans are going to know, other than the folks listening right now. So, with all that said, you guys were awesome. This was a ton of fun. I really appreciate all the questions and everything that's there. If you enjoyed what you did tonight, please make sure to hit that like button. Leave me a comment. That goes a long ways when I'm trying to get a new show started up here, like the Greg Tompsett Sports Show. It really helps if you guys go in and leave me a comment. Tell me who your number 1 trade target is. Tell me if you think I was crazy to dismiss one of the names I went through. If there was a name that I missed that you really wanted me to be able to go in and research, and I promise I'll check through the comments and try to add back any of the ones that were there, or answer about my thoughts on them, or what the contract would be, or if we could afford to add them. So anything that you see there, please go in and check it out. This was a ton of fun. I really had fun. I actually went a lot longer than I thought I would going through here, but you guys were great in the chat, giving me a lot of different questions and suggestions. So thank you very, very much about all your contributions and help here tonight. It really, really means a lot to me. Again, press that like button on the way out. It would go a long ways for it. But on behalf of everybody at Cover One, thank you for checking this out. I am Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to the Greg Tompsett Sports Show, and we are out.